Hello, everyone. Good evening, Dr. Aquino. Good evening, classmates, and to the viewers of this presentation. My name is Vicente B. Emper, and this is my final requirement for the subject LLI 241, Advanced World Literature. Now, without further ado, let me start. Before I formally discuss the story of personal choice, allow me to present to you 3 questions to ponder. Now, the first question is this one. When can we say that we genuinely fell in love with a person or with that person? Assuming that you are in a relationship right now and you are sure of your feelings. Now, what are your indications that your love for that someone is real or genuine? Try to think. Okay, the next question would be, what is unconditional love for you? What is unconditional love? Aside from our parents love is considered unconditional. Now, what makes it unconditional? And again, if you are in a relationship right now, try to think. Is it unconditional love that you are giving to that special someone? Next, the third question is, what are the things you are willing to sacrifice in the name of love? Sounds interesting. Aside from the material things, because there are people who love to express their feelings or admiration to their special someone by giving gifts, flowers, fresh flowers, chocolates, or beautiful things like cellular phones. We also have dress, t-shirts, or any other outfits that simply make your special someone happy. Now, keep your answers and get back to it after I discuss this story about unconditional love. Okay, let's continue. My story, or I chose this story entitled Federigo's Falcon. This story is written by Giovanni Boccaccio. Okay, let's start. Let's talk about the author first. Who is Giovanni Boccaccio? Giovanni Boccaccio was born in the year 1313. He died on December 21 in the year 1375. He is an Italian author, a poet of the early Renaissance era, and the author of the Decameron and on famous women. Aside from that, stylistically, Boccaccio stands apart from his contemporaries for breaking with the tradition of his times and forsaking the high-mannered, idealistic depictions that were common in the literature of the day. Instead, Boccaccio elected to write with a sense of realism, choosing to write in the common vernacular, depicting realistic characters and scenes and having them interact with realistic dialogue. In the world of professionals, well, we consider Boccaccio as a professional one, or even in other fields. We always follow what is standard. The standard is our SOP, or the things that we need to abide or to follow always. In the case of Boccaccio, he goes beyond, and that's what makes him unique and famous. He goes beyond. Instead of following the standard, he chose to break the tradition. He wants to be relatable. He wants his stories to be realistic. Now, um, the words you are seeing on screen, in this portion, this is the full copy or a full copy of the story, Federico's Falcon. Allow me to read this story, and what comes after this one is um, the explanation, the analysis, at the same time, the elements of the short story, of this short story, Federigo's Falcon by Giovanni Boccaccio. There was once in Florence a young man named Federigo, the son of Messer Filippo Alberige, renowned above all other men in Tuscany for his prowess in arms and for his courtliness. As often happens to most gentlemen, he fell in love with a lady named Monna Giovanna, in her day considered to be one of the most beautiful and one of the most charming women that ever there was in Florence. And in order to win her love, he participated in jousts and tournaments, organized and gave feasts, and spent his money without restraint. But she, no less virtuous than beautiful, cared little for these things done on her behalf, nor did she care for him who did them. Now, as Federigo was spending far beyond his means and was taking nothing in, as easily happens, he lost his wealth and became poor, with nothing but his little farm to his name, from whose revenues he lived very meagerly, and one falcon, which was among the best in the world. We can simply imagine how crazy in love Federigo. It's what we call genuine love. He did everything just to please the girl that he loves most, and that is Mona Giovanna. Now, more in love than ever, but knowing that he would never be able to live the way he wished to in the city, he went to live at Campi, where his farm was. There he passed his time hawking whenever he could, asking nothing of anyone, and endured his poverty patiently. Now, during the time that Federigo was reduced to dire need, it happened that the husband of Mona Giovanna fell ill, and realizing death was near, he made his last will. He was very rich, and he made his son, who was growing up, his heir. And since he had loved Mona Giovanna very much, he made her his heir should his son die without a legitimate heir, and then he died. Mona Giovanna was now a widow, and as is the custom among our women, she went to the country with her son to spend a year on one of her possessions very close by to Federico's farm. And it happened that this young boy became friends with Federico and began to enjoy birds and hunting dogs. And after he had seen Federico's falcon fly many times, it pleased him so much that he very much wished it were his own. But he did not dare to ask for it, for he could see how dear it was to Federico. And during this time, it happened that the young boy took ill, and his mother was much grieved, for he was her only child, and she loved him enormously. She would spend the entire day by his side, never ceasing to comfort him, and often asking him if there was anything he desired, begging him to tell her what it might be. For if it were possible to obtain it, she would certainly do everything possible to get it. After the young boy had heard her make this offer many times, he said, "Mother, if you can arrange for me to have Federico's falcon, I think I would be very well, or well, very soon. Now, describing Mona Giovanna, the way he interacts or the way she sacrifices things for her son is what we call unconditional love. Also, in this case, a mother's unconditional love for his son. But take note of the form. At the same time, the falcon, those were instrumental for Mana and Federigo to meet again. Most of all, of course, the son who admire most Federigo's falcon. It was actually instrumental in their love story. Now, let's continue. When the lady heard this, she was taken aback for a moment, and she began to think what she should do. She knew that Federigo had loved her for a long while, in spite of the fact that he never received a single glance from her, and so she said to herself, how can I send or go and ask for this falcon of his, which is, as I have heard, tell the best that ever flew, and besides this, his only means of support? And how can I be so insensitive as to wish to take away from this gentleman the only pleasure which is left to him? And involved in these thoughts, knowing that she was certain to have the bird if she asked for it, but not knowing what to say to her son, she stood there without answering him. Finally, the love she bore her son persuaded her that she should make him happy, and no matter what the consequences might be, she would not send for the bird, but rather go herself for it and bring it back to him. So she answered her son, my son, take comfort and think only of getting well. For I promise you that the first thing I shall do tomorrow morning is to go for it and bring it back to you. The child was so happy that he showed some improvement the very day. The following morning, the lady, accompanied by another a woman, as if going for a stroll, went to Federico's modest house and asked for him. Since it was not the season for it, Federigo had not been hawking for some days and was in his orchard attending to certain tasks. When he heard that Mona Giovanna was asking for him at the door, he was very surprised and happy to run there. As she saw him coming, she greeted him with a feminine charm, and once Federigo had welcomed her courteously, she said, well, in this case, we can um, we can sense that Mana's son was full of admiration um, to the falcon of Federigo. He was really amazed of the falcon, and it seems that the falcon would be of great help for his health, to be better. And as the mother, Mana um, is expected to do her very best to get the falcon, to ask for the falcon from Federico. Now let's see what happens next. Greetings, Federigo. Then she continued, I have come to compensate you for the harm you have suffered on my account by loving me more than you needed to. And the compensation is this. I, along with this companion of mine, intend to dine with you, a simple meal, this very day. From this particular line of Mona, we can really say that Mona was shy to say directly to Federigo what his real intentions are. In this case, she intends to dine first with Federigo before she tells Federigo um, her real intention. Now, to this, Federigo humbly replied, Madonna, I never remember having suffered any harm because of you. On the contrary, so much good have I received from you that if ever I have been worthy or worth anything, it has been because of your merit and the love I bore for you. And your generous visit is certainly so dear to me that I would spend all over again that which I spent in the past. But you have come to a poor host. In this case, the love of Federigo to Mona never faded away. It's still fresh, or his feelings to Mona was so consistent. And having said this, he received her into his home humbly, and from there he led her into his garden. And since he had no one there to keep her company, he said, "My lady, since there is no one else, this good woman here, the wife of this workman, will keep you company while I go to set the table." Okay, next. Though he was very poor, Federigo until now had never before realized to what extent he had wasted his wealth. But this morning, the fact that he found nothing with which he could honor the lady for the love of whom he had once entertained countless men in the past gave him cause to reflect. In great anguish, he cursed himself and his fortune, and like a man beside himself, he started running here and there, but could find neither money nor a pawnable object. The hour was late, and his desire to honor the gracious lady was great, but not wishing to turn for help to others, and even to his own workmen, he set his eyes upon his good falcon, perched in a small room. And since he had nowhere else to turn, he took the bird, and finding it plump, he decided that it would be a worthy food for such a lady. So, without further thought, he wrung its neck and quickly gave it to his servant girl to pluck, prepare, and place on a spit to be roasted with care. And when he had set a table with the whitest of tablecloths, a few of which he still had left, he returned with a cheerful face to the lady in his garden, saying that the meal he was able to prepare for her was ready. See what happened? Federigo just realized how um, important his wealth when Mona was in his abode, when was in his home or in his humble abode, because he has great feelings and admiration for Mona. He wants to give Mona only the best. But in this case, since he is so poor, he has no choice. He became so frustrated, but he has no choice. And his only choice, by the way, is to offer his one and only falcon. Next, the lady and her companion Rose went to the table together with Federigo, who waited upon them with the greatest devotion, and they ate the good falcon without knowing what it was they were eating. And having left the table and spent some time in pleasant conversation, the lady thought it time now to say what she had come to say. And so she spoke these kind words to Federigo. I can imagine Mona eating um, the bird, the falcon. That's her first intention in that's her intention why she came to the house of Federigo. Federigo, if you recall your past life and my virtue, which you perhaps mistook for harshness and cruelty, I do not doubt at all that you will be amazed by my presumption when you hear what my reason or main reason for coming here is. But if you had children through whom you might have experienced the power of parental love, it seems certain to me that you would, at least in part, forgive me. But just as you have no child, I do have one, and I cannot escape the common laws of other mothers. The force of such laws compels me to follow them, against my own will and against good manners and duty, and to ask of you a gift which I know is most precious to you. And it is naturally so, since your extreme condition has left you no other delight, no other pleasure, no other consolation. And this gift is your falcon, which my son is so taken by that, if I do not bring it to him, I fear his sickness will grow so much worse that I may lose him. And therefore I beg you, not because of the love that you bear for me, which does not oblige you in the least, but because of your own nobility, which you have shown to be greater than that of all others in practicing courtliness, that you be pleased to give it to me, so that I may say that I have saved the life of my son by means of this gift, and because of it, I have placed him in your debt forever. What Mona did was a show of respect and admiration to Federigo. Respect in a sense that she can just simply say, "Oh, I need your falcon for my son." But he didn't do it. But she didn't do it. What she did was she explained first because she respects Federigo. She admires Federigo. The actions that Federigo consistently showed to Mona was just amazing, that it moved Mona. Next, when he heard what the lady requested and knew that he could not oblige her since he had given her the falcon to eat, Federigo began to weep in her presence, for he could not utter a word in reply. The lady at first thought his tears were caused more by the sorrow of having to part with a good falcon than by anything else, and she was on the verge of telling him she no longer wished it, but she held back and waited for Federigo's reply after he stopped weeping, and he said, "My lady, ever since it pleased God for me to place my love in you, I have felt that fortune has been hostile to me in many things, and I have complained of her. But all this is nothing compared to what she has just done to me, and I must never be at peace with her again, thinking about how you have come here to my poor home, where, while it was rich, you never deigned to come, and you requested the small gift, and fortune worked to make it impossible for me to give it to you. And why this is so, I shall tell you briefly. When I heard that you, out of your kindness, wished to dine with me, I considered it fitting and right, taking into account your excellence and your worthiness, that I should honor you according to my possibilities with a more precious food than that which I usually serve to other people. Therefore, remembering the falcon that you requested at it and its value, I judged it a food worthy of you. And this very day you had it roasted and served to you as best I could. But seeing now that you desired it in another way, my sorrow in not being able to serve you is so great that I shall never be able to console myself again. See, observe the humility of both characters. Instead of Mona getting mad because the falcon was eaten by them, because the falcon isn't alive anymore, she showed um her genuine feeling. She was able to overcome that that sense of hatred, that assumed sense of hatred, because she could be mad, because if she's not really in love with Federigo, she could be mad easily, because her real intention is the falcon and not Federigo. What happened? It's the love of Mona that is very much evident. Same with Federigo. After he found out that the purpose of Mona, the main purpose of Mona in coming to his house is the falcon only, he showed his consistent love and admiration to Mona instead of showing hatred, instead of showing any negative emotions to her. Okay, next. And after he had said this, he laid the feathers, the feet, and the beak of the bird before her as proof. When the lady heard and saw this, she first reproached him for having killed such a falcon to serve as a meal to a woman. But then to herself she commended the greatness of his spirit, which no poverty was able or would be able to diminish. Then, having lost all hope of getting the falcon, and perhaps because of this, of improving the health of her son as well, she thanked Federigo both for the honor paid to her and for his goodwill, and she left in grief and returned to her son. Now, to his mother's extreme sorrow, either because of his disappointment that he could not have the falcon, or because his illness must have necessarily led to it, the boy passed from his life only a few days later. After the period of her mourning and bitterness had passed, the lady was repeatedly urged by her brothers to remarry, since she was very rich and was still young. And although she did not wish to do so, they became so insistent that she remembered the merits of Federigo and his last act of generosity, that is, to have killed such a falcon to do her honor. And she said to her brothers, I would never, I would prefer to remain a widow if that would please you. But if you wish me to take a husband, you may rest assured that I shall take no man but Federigo degli Alberigue. In answer to this, making fun of her, her brothers replied, You foolish woman, what are you saying? How can you want him? He hasn't he hasn't a penny to his name. To this she replied, My brothers, I am well aware of what you say, but I would rather have a man who needs money than money that needs a man. Her brothers, seeing that she was determined, and knowing Federigo to be of noble birth, no matter how poor he was, accepted her wishes and gave her in marriage to him with all her riches. When he found himself the husband of such a great lady, whom he had loved so much, and who was so wealthy besides, he managed his financial affairs with more prudence than in the past and lived with her happily the rest of his days. Okay, now let's try to explore the essential elements of this story we have just read. First, the setting. The story happened and in Italian time. This was during Italian Renaissance, 14th current or common era. It happened in Tuscany and Campi. Next, for the characters and characterization, the main characters are first Federigo Alberigue, a nobleman who fell in love and sacrificed for love. Next, Mona Giovanna, a beautiful married woman beyond all imagination. She has a son. The third character is Mona's husband. Mona's husband is a very rich man, the late husband of Mona Giovanna before Federigo Alberigue. Mona's son is a spoiled son of Mona, and of course, her first with her first husband. And finally, Falcon. It's Federigo's favorite, one and only pet. the best falcon that ever flew. Those are the main characters in the story. Next, let's explore the elements. First, the exposition. In the exposition, it's the introduction of the characters. So usually this is located in the first part of the story. During the Renaissance 14th current or common era, at Tuscany and Campi lived Federigo, a rich and noble man with a pet falcon who fell in love with Mona, a beautiful married woman with a son. Next, the rising action. This is the start of the twist. In the rising action, Federigo became poor. Why? Okay, let's take a look at the line from the story. Why Federigo became poor. Federigo fell in love with a beautiful lady named Mona Giovanna, and in order to win her love, he participated in jousts and tournaments, organized and gave feasts, and spent his money without restraint. But she, no less virtuous than beautiful, cared little for these things done on her behalf, nor did she care for him who did them. Now, as Federico was spending far beyond his means and was taking nothing in, as easily happens, he lost his wealth and became poor with nothing but his little farm to his name and one falcon. In this case, the reason why Federico became poor, it was because he was crazy in love with Mona, and he thought that by spending all of his money, he would be able to claim his main or one and only prize, and that is Mona Giovanna. But Mona was a was a girl who is different from others. She isn't bothered with the presents, with the expenses, or even with Federigo at all. She doesn't care during this time. Next, for the climax. For the climax, Federigo cooked his falcon and Mona's son died. Why did Federigo cook his falcon? And why is it that Mona's son died? Let's take a look at the lines from the story. When I heard that you, this is Federigo who is talking, out of your kindness, wished to dine with me, I considered it fitting and right, taking into account your excellence and your worthiness, that I should honor you according to my possibilities with a more precious food than that which I usually serve to other people. Therefore, remembering the falcon that you requested at its value, I judged it a food worthy of you. And this very day, you had it roasted and served to you as best I could. Now, because Mona failed to bring the falcon to her son eventually died a few days after. But we don't know the real reason, if it's because of the falcon, because um, the son wasn't able to see the falcon whom he admired most, or is it because of his illness? To his mother's extreme sorrow, either because of his disappointment that he could not have the falcon or because his illness must have necessarily led to it, the boy passed from this life only a few days later. In the climax, we um, we can sense the importance of the falcon, the symbol of falcon. The falcon as Federigo's best friend, as Federigo's one and only pet. It was important for Federigo. And because it is important for Federigo, and since Federigo has no money to provide yummy or delicious food for his visitors, which is Mona, he had no choice but to kill the falcon and serve it to the person he loved the most. Okay, next to the climax is the falling action. For the falling action, Mona fell in love with Federigo. This was the time wherein Mona realized that she admires Federigo, the kindness of Federigo, the efforts of Federigo. After the period of her mourning and bitterness had passed, the lady was repeatedly urged by her brothers. Her brothers were instrumental for her to remarry again, and that person would be Federigo. Since she was very rich and was still young, and although she did not wish to do so, they became so insistent that she remembered the merits of Federigo and his last act of generosity, that is, to have killed such a falcon to do her honor. And she said to her brothers, I would prefer to remain a widow, if that would please you. But if you wish me to take a husband, you may rest assured that I shall take no man but Federigo degli Alberighe. Since Mona is rich already, she doesn't care about richness, or she doesn't care about uh, about luxurious life. She doesn't care about riches. She wants someone who is genuinely or who loves her genuinely. And that person is none other than Federigo. Because of Federigo's consistent, genuine action. And those genuine actions are proof of his a great love and admiration to Mona. Now, in this case, in the following action, Mona is clear, or Mona is very much sure of her decision that if given a chance to marry someone, again, because she's still young, she would be marrying Federigo without any hesitation. Next, for the resolution, Federigo and Mona got married and they lived happily ever after. Her brothers, seeing that she was determined and knowing Federigo to be of noble birth, no matter how poor he was, accepted her wishes and gave her in marriage to him with all her riches. When he found himself the husband of such a great lady, whom he had loved so much and who was so wealthy besides, he managed his financial affairs with more prudence than in the past and lived with her happily the rest of his days. Like any other beautiful love stories, their love story ended happily. And the two main characters got married, and they lived happily ever after. Um, the situation uh, did not just change Mona; it also changed. Didn't just change Mona. It also changed Federigo. The way he handles his finances. He's now careful, for he knows that it's not just about him anymore. It's now about him in the first place, Mana, his better half, and of course, their stability as a married couple. Okay, and that's the resolution of this story. Now let's talk about the conflict. There are two: man versus himself. In Man versus Himself, it's about Federigo, Who could have thought twice of doing silly things such as spending too much money just to win a girl's heart? Yes, it's a conflict between Federigo and himself. But since Federigo was genuinely in love with Mona, he has no choice but to do everything he can, even the silliest of things, just to prove her love, her great love to Mona. Next, man versus man. Mona not giving any attention to Federigo, even though she knew he became poor because of her. In this case, Mona wasn't able to realize or to feel nor realize the efforts, the genuine efforts of Federigo. Maybe because Mona is the kind of girl that doesn't want to have those kinds of things, luxurious things. Mona's son asked for the Falcon. This is the second example of the conflict, man versus man. If the Falcon was presented to the son of Mona, then Mona's spoiled son could be alive until now, could still be alive until now. But what happened was the opposite. And and since it was, I believe, part of their destiny, part of the plan for them to reunite and to live happily. Next, the theme and symbolism. The theme, it's clear. It's about unconditional love. Federigo, Federigo and Mona loved. Both Federigo and Mona loved. Both Federigo and Mona expressed their love without expecting any in return. What's the proof of this? Federigo, um, talking about his possessions, the wealth he had during the first part of the story, or during that time when he met Mona. She was so in love with Mona that he did everything, including the spending of most of his wealth. That's how in love Federico was. But the good thing is that even if Federico lost his wealth, he wasn't expecting for something in return. Well, he's expecting for Mona to say yes and to marry him, because that's what his real intention. Aside, um, in terms of other things, he wasn't expecting any from Mona, because he only wants one thing: for Mona to say yes and for Mona's love to him. Now, for Mona's unconditional love, she was able to show this one through his son, through her son. Mona's love, unconditional love for her son, was so evident, particularly during the time when her son was ill. She wasn't comfortable going to, or she was not comfortable in going to the house of Federico, but she has no choice. She needs to do it, not for herself, but for her son. And that is a mother's unconditional love. Now, Mona's unconditional love for Federigo was evident in the last part of this story. Mona was rich. She could remarry again. She could remarry a person who is rich also. But what happened? Her admiration and her admiration and feelings towards Federigo was showing already, was um, was manifesting already. In this case, she doesn't want to marry any person or anyone who is rich. She only wants she only wants one thing, and that is to marry Federigo. Federigo, because she was clear already, or she is clear already of her feelings toward him. That is unconditional love. And the symbolism, this one, the falcon, symbolizes sacrifice. The falcon is an important symbol of sacrifice in this story. Mm, In the first place, Mona's son um, admired the falcon, but he knew in the first he knew that the falcon is so dear to Federigo, that the falcon is the best friend of Federigo, that the falcon is so special to Federigo. So he has no guts, he has no strength to ask for the falcon personally from Federigo. Next, Federigo, because of his love to Mona, even if the falcon matters to him uh, dearly, he has no choice but to sacrifice the most important thing for him just to please the love of his life. And that's one great sacrifice that he did for Mona. The lesson that we can get from this story is, of course, it's still about unconditional love. That when you love, if it's genuine or if it's real, we are actually not expecting anything in return. When you love, you give what you have, but it doesn't mean that you'll give everything. When you love, you make that person happy because you know that if that person is happy, you become happy too. I hope you learned something from this beautiful story, Federigo's Falcon. This is your discussion for this short story. My name is Vicente Emperor. Have a great night. Thank you and goodbye.